And we're live.
Hello.
Hello.
La, la, la. Hello, all. Welcome. It is Monday night. Generational Change. I'm Jen.
I'm Pedro. And the fun doesn't stop.
No, it just keeps going.
But you have to figure out how to get some rest in between these very grueling days, I would say.
I don't know. It's just like a giant whirlwind.
Oh, well. I'll get back to you in the fall. Then you can get some rest. So whoever is here, make sure you smash that like button. And we are, again, we've made it very clear, we are separating the two entities. So we are now only broadcasting on YouTube. So if you guys want to...
And Rumble. And
I
think Rockfin, if there's anybody over there.
Well, I don't think so. I mean, we're not that popular.
No.
We don't have any big super channels encouraging people to come and follow our
channels.
So
we don't. We've got to be on we're on YouTube. We're on YouTube.
Yeah, we're on YouTube, but where else would we rather be? And have to watch later. Well, Ray, at least you're letting us know. I mean, that counts, right? Yes, it has.
It's definitely going to be lower numbers on just YouTube, but that's just the way it's got to be.
Chip, thank you so much.
Oh, excellent.
Street demo here.
Yeah, it is today. So today is tax day, and today has also been like global solidarity actions for Palestine. I saw several that were really impressive. They shut down the Golden Gate Bridge for 5 hours.
Yeah, that's true.
They also shut down. I saw them blocking entrances into Chicago's O'Hare Airport, and people were having to get out of their cars like off the highway and walk with their luggage because the highway was shut down to O'Hare.
Yeah, but that's not really surprising because I think at some point people need to realize, as we've been talking about constantly, whether from our Congresswoman, who you're, et cetera, or for that matter, a significant portion of the congressional delegation, it not only do they avoid paying taxes, but they also participate in insider trading.
Yeah.
So it's easy to see why the average person looks at the current system and says, well, if they're doing this, why should I have to pay?
Well, there's that. And then there's also, we're watching a genocide. So most of the actions were in correlation with shut it down for Palestine. And there were a lot of them. And I'm very pleased.
Yeah, we're going to wait for our guys to join us. Of course, we are going to discuss the protests, which were pretty significant today. The most significant, of course, being in front of Lockheed Martin. It appears that the security detail didn't really know what to do. They were kind of shocked that people would actually show up and, cause...
these people are serious. Like, they're chaining their arms together and locking down highways. And so, yes, they do get arrested. But in the meantime, they were able to shut down Golden Gate Bridge. I think it was 5 hours. And that's pretty significant. That's pretty significant. They're causing a whole lot of disruption. And yes, even though people are getting arrested, it's still being very effective. And it pleases me. I'm glad. Shut down O'Hare. We need to just shut it all down.
Yeah.
That's the thing. They need to shut it all down. Like,
well, where's your vest?
It's over here.
You got your vest?
I do have my vest. This is my vest. I mean, like, this is what we're going for. We want to get to the yellow vests.
Yeah, I think we're heading in that direction.
I mean, we're doing veterans today, but we will be speaking with our friends from Eisenhower Media Network. We have a lot of explaining to do.
Colin, also, if you can get a small clip from Glenn Greenwald talking earlier about the fact that the spy bill was successfully reauthorized thanks to Mike Johnson. Debbie, of course, voted for it.
We'll go over the people. We'll go over the that's what we call bipartisan effort.
And of course, as I've been saying constantly for a very long time, there's a reason why I like Congressman Thomas Massey. And
he didn't vote for it, right?
And of course, he's out there saying this is how the Constitution dies.
And he's a Republican.
Yeah, this is how it dies.
This is why we have to stop with the labels. But yeah, that's a big problem.
Yeah.
The FISA bill is a big problem. And we're having, an Iran situation, which ever since this started back in October with the assault on Gaza, I have been very loudly proclaiming that Israel is going to continue to try to bait us into a war with Iran. That has been their goal. And the truth is, there's people in our government that's one of their end goals, is to be at war with Iran. So it's really, not at all surprising. And I really think that people need to understand that the only reason that Israel is not leveled is because Iranians have restraint. That's the only thing. And the fact that they're upset that there was any even, perfunctory retaliation on the part of Iran is just, the level of entitlement with these people is just unreal to me. Israel bombed an embassy. They bombed an Iranian embassy. That is the equivalent of bombing Iran. Like, it's really a big deal. And the fact that this was how they retaliated, knowing that they would be intercepted. Make no mistake, if Iran wanted to drop bombs on top of Haifa, they would.
Yeah, there's also this suspicion that they actually do have nukes and that they just choose not to.
It doesn't even matter. It doesn't need to be nukes, though. It really doesn't need to be nukes. They can level places without nukes. So that's not even required at this point. So that's the thing. I mean, I really do believe that. And so people need to understand, the people that are showing restraint are the Iranians. And seriously, I'm very thankful that there are people in other countries that seem to have their heads on straight. I am, because obviously that's not happening here. So, because as far as I'm concerned, Iran would be justified in really doing some serious damage.
And they have the ability to do serious damage if they choose to. That's the thing. It's not that they don't have the capability. This could easily, and again, this is the thing. Sometimes it's better to be lucky than good, because right now we don't have the type of leadership in this moment that we desperately need. Now, President Biden, you could say to his credit, whether he actually said it or not, I didn't see it said publicly. I know what he said publicly the other day, which was, we are ironclad in our support for Israel. But then they put out a press release saying that we do not support a retaliatory action from Israel onto Iran. But again, I don't see you see, this is the type of situation throughout history when a circumstance like this calls for a presidential address from the Oval Office to make a firm statement about what's going on right now, that we do not support escalating this into a Middle East war, which, let's be honest, would lead to World War III. That is what would happen if Iran and Israel start going at it, because that will draw Turkey into the mix.
It's a disaster.
Will draw Lebanon, and then eventually it'll get Russia and China involved. And so this cannot stand.
That's what they want.
Of course.
This is what they want.
But this is what Netanyahu's government wants.
Yes. Israel's been trying to engage with Iran. First of all, they've been wanting to go after Iran for years.
Decades.
I mean, this has been going on for
this is going on since 1970.
But we have a ton of people in our country. We have people that are representatives, senators, people that are very, very interested in being in war with Iran. This is not new. So a lot of this is somewhat manufacturing consent seeming to me, but that's generally where my mind goes with all of this. But it is going to be very interesting watching Joe. On the one hand, we stand in complete solidarity with Israel. On the other hand, but we're wanting you to not do that, but as if they're going to listen. Yeah. And again, I don't see it. I don't see why we would even be thinking about Israel retaliating when this was the retaliation for what they did.
Yeah.
It's so they just like to start their narrative at the day that they want to start their narrative. You know.
I think without further ado, we do have an amazing panelist joining us tonight, because these are the types of situations where we don't need other people's opinion about whether we should or should not go to war that have never served in war. It is amazing.
Except for mine. I have a really good opinion on it.
Oh, you do?
I do.
Well, you're anti-war.
I am always anti-war.
I think you are. I mean,
I'm always anti-war.
You might secretly.
No, I am just.
I don't know what type of situation this may be.
To me, war is just symbolic of complete human failure. That's human failure. That's what it is. If that is where you are going, then you have failed. It's that simple, because I just feel like we're so much more capable. So
I think we are
that's
more
a
than
failure.
capable, but that's
neither.
But that's not, unfortunately, where we are at this moment. So without further ado, you guys know the Eisenhower Media Network is who we turn to when it comes to anything related to foreign policy, especially foreign conflict. And in this case, we are dealing with the worst possible scenario of foreign conflict that could unfold. So it certainly would speak to reason to speak with people who have served in the worst type of capacity for this. So, of course, Matthew Hoh, Christian Sorensen, and Dennis Fritz, welcome back to Generational Change.
Hey, guys.
Dennis, check your audio.
Hey, listen, I was going to say,
there he is.
Hey, let me just first of all, and I'm assuming that you can hear me loud and clear.
Absolutely.
And I see Matt smiling too. There's an inside story. Let me just first say this. Let me truly apologize to you all for last week. But more importantly, I was able to hear you all, and I stayed on for the entire segment. And I was so impressed of how y'all ad-libbed and did that so impromptu and filled the entire show. And I enjoyed the show. And oh, by the way, the reason Matt is smiling is because of the fact I shared with Matt. I said, oh, Lord, my mic screwed up again. So just so you'll know, I went out today and brought brand new equipment. And my good IT friend helped me set everything up.
No, it's awesome. I'm so glad to hear it. Hi, how are you guys doing? Hi, Chris.
How's it going?
It's going good. It's good to see you guys. Clearly, we're in a shit show right now. Like, I honestly do not even know where to start. Although I do kind of, because Matthew, you were supposed to come on and talk after you went before the committee, and you were able to talk before the UN, and that's really cool, by the way. So we were going to talk about that. So I don't know, like, we could start there. I'm not even sure where to start with this, guys. Thoughts?
Hey, Matt and Christensen, because listen, guys, I'm so honored to be on here with Matt and Christensen, and I'm just, riding on their coattail. And so I'm going to probably do a sit back and listen because they're so great and so articulate. But let me just share one thing to get this started, because I speak in assumptions, opinions, and facts. So I'm going to give you some fact and just jump on what y'all said earlier about what's going on right now and how they've been always wanting to go after Iran.
Yeah.
If you remember about it, it's been months and months now. I said I had a book coming out. It'll soon be out. I'll make sure y'all get a copy. But I'm going to give you a fact. The Iraq war was based on what's happening now. Bibi and the far right politicians of Israel has always wanted to take out what we call the funding network for Hezbollah and Hamas. And at the time, it was Saddam that was the primary funder of Hamas. And so the Iraq war was created because Bibi and the far right at the time wanted to go in and do exactly what they're doing right now. But Rumsfeld, Wolfowitz, and all people, Newt Gingrich was part of this too, because he was on what you call the Defense Policy Board. That's an advisory group to the Secretary of Defense. Newt Gingrich said, oh, no, you can't do this because of the fact we will not be able to take the pushback with all the killings and carnage that would take place if we let Israel do that. So what we'll do, because he had the right group in there at the time, the neocons, he had the right group in there at the time to go in and say, we'll do this for you, but we're going to do it by warfare. We're going to create this war on terror. And then what we're going to do, we're going to go after Iraq first, because we have what we call, under the Clinton administration, a regime policy, to take out Saddam. We're going to do that. And oh, by the way, also, we're going to find an excuse to go in. They couldn't come up with any excuses at the time. They were using, we had some watches, and I know Matt and Kristen probably understand this, Operation Northern Watch and Southern Watch. After the first Gulf War, we were protecting the Kurds in the north and the Shia in the south. And they even went as far to say, maybe we'll shoot down one of our own helicopters and blame it on Saddam, so we can go in and get him. So the bottom line, and I just want to jump on what y'all said, this has always been in the plan, but we held Bibi at the time and the far right politicians from doing it and said, we'll take care of it. And unfortunately, 9/11, now I'm not a conspiracy theory when they say, hey, it was an inside job, but you take this to the bank. I saw you not verbal. This is a fact, though. This is a fact what I'm about to say. Unfortunately, they were happy it happened. Mm-hmm. And why were they happy? because it gave them the true rationale to be able to start their war on terror and go after Iraq first, then Syria, and then save Iran for last. We'll talk more about that because they were scared of Iran because Iran is such a large country and they do have some response power, as we're going to soon see if they truly decide to respond again, that being Israel decided to respond. So now I'll shut up and that'll probably start the conversation. And I'm going to sit back and watch Chris and Matt.
Yeah, talk about now, because that is so now forward to today and where we are. And I think to me, what it looks like as a civilian person is that Iran is taking the high road.
Absolutely.
Am I wrong, Matt? Like, or Chris?
No, I mean, go ahead, Chris. You want to go?
No, I was just going to agree there. The Iran has been incredibly restrained. I mean, Israel has been beaten up on Iran for years now. It's been killing Iranian scientists. It has been hitting Iran with cyber attacks. It has been the aggressor in the region. And it has even been killing Iranian personnel when they are transiting or in Syria. So for anybody in mainstream media or in Washington, D.C. to claim that Israel is the victim and Iran is the aggressor, they have it backwards. What do you think, Matt?
Right. And then just more proximate, the more immediate events that have occurred. One, the genocide in Gaza, of course, but the continual attacks by Israel against Iranian personnel in Syria, and most recently on April 1st, when in just an amazing and brazen insult to international law, Israel attacked the Iranian consulate in Damascus, and the Iranians waited 10 days. The Iranians were hoping for some type of resolution or some type of action by the United Nations to address Israel's attack on the Iranian consulate. And when that didn't occur, they launched this attack over the weekend. And to show how restrained it was, how it really was a demonstration, more of a cautionary gesture than anything else. They announced to nations in the region, including the United States, 3 days ahead of time that they were going to launch these attacks. And then when it's funny because Dennis was the one who told me the attacks were going on, he called me and I'm talking to him and he says they've launched the attacks. And I said, okay, so I'm thinking, I was thinking when I get home, I'll see us on I'll watch this on television. And Dennis says, it's about 6 hours before the drones get there. So not only that, this is what's completely unprecedented, because giving notice can sometimes occur. This is what the Iranians actually did in 2020 when they responded to the American assassination of General Soleimani. They gave notice that they were going to attack. The U.S. knew that those ballistic missiles were going to be going towards El Asad Air Base, and we were able to get all our troops in the bunkers. So the Iranians have done this before. And so they launched this attack as a cautionary gesture, as a warning. They knew most of those drones and missiles were going to get shot down. They knew it was unlikely they were going to do much damage. They knew it was unlikely that they would cause any type of civilian harm. But the gesture in itself is a double-edged gesture. There's a very real danger in this. Any nation that can launch 330 drones and missiles as a cautionary tale, as an act, as a warning, saying, we don't care if you shoot these all down because we have so many more. And I think that's the point that's getting lost in the West in their celebration of this great Israeli victory of shooting down 99% of Iranian drones and missiles, is that the Iranians didn't care about that. They threw those things up as a sacrifice, and they have thousands and thousands more. And the fact that in the West and in Israel, that's being ignored is a degree of arrogance and ignorance and hubris that is incredibly dangerous.
So what are their capabilities? Like what could they do? Because I remember seeing something at some point where I got the understanding that they could level Haifa. What can they do?
Between go ahead, Dennis.
No, you got it. Go ahead, Matt. I'll comment.
Between their own capabilities, missile fleets and drone fleets that number in the tens of thousands, essentially. The idea that the Iranians have been preparing for this conflict for decades, just as they've been preparing to, say, fight the American Navy in the Straits of Hormuz for decades, right? So they have focused on this. They have prepared for this. And they also have allies. So they have allies in Hezbollah, who has at least 100,000 missiles and rockets that they can fire from southern Lebanon into Israel. They have allies in Syria. Who's Syria's ally? Russia. This is where it starts to get very dangerous. Who also has troops in Syria alongside of Russia? The Americans, right? So not only are there great capabilities that the Iranians have, and I'm sure Chris can talk about a bunch of other capabilities like their cyber capabilities and other things, as well as the threat of, say, economic warfare. Israel is already having great deal of economic distress over these last 6 months. But the idea that not only can the capabilities of Iran are something that may be underestimated, but the dangers of escalation are something that, the risk of escalation here is something that can't be ignored.
In regards to that, when you mentioned what are their capabilities, I'll just share a couple things with you. As Matt alluded to earlier about their response after General Soleimani's death and assassination, we'll call it. If you remember during the Iran nuclear deal, why folks were saying, oh, it was a bad deal, and Trump comes in and gets rid of the deal. The reason they did that is because of the fact they wanted Iran to get rid of their ballistic missiles, because they are very powerful. They don't need a nuclear weapon, to be quite frank with you, to destroy. When you say they can destroy Jerusalem and Tehran. Yeah. I mean, not Tehran, but the capital, Tel Aviv, yeah. Right. Their ballistic missiles are so good, and some of their other weapon systems are so good and sophisticated and accurate. All you have to do is just ask Russia, who's being provided, some of those weapon systems. So that should tell you right there. So they have the power to do it. But as Christensen alluded to earlier, they've been very restrained. But they have the capability to really put out a lot of harm. And that's why we didn't, when Trump was saying, oh, if they attack us, we're going to retaliate. That's why they didn't, because when they saw those ballistic missiles, and as Matt mentioned, the only reason we found out about it is because of the fact that Iran alerted the factions in Iraq that we were going to bomb this particular base. They didn't necessarily alert the Americans, they alerted Iraq, and then Iraq alerted the Americans, and who were able to get under the bunkers and get some of the stuff out and some of the personnel away. And so what I can tell you, Iran means business because they're tired of being restrained, just trying to do the right thing. Yeah. Kristen?
Well, I'm curious as to where we go from here, because Israel has promised to escalate. Israel has promised to hit Iran. And I wonder how the Biden administration is going to not get directly involved, because the Biden administration, according to news reports, has said quietly to the Israelis that it doesn't want a direct role in whatever Israel's planning. But I don't see, once the stuff starts flying, I don't see a way that the United States is not involved. So I'd ask Matt and Dennis, how do you guys see us not being a direct party to whatever Israel does, or actually laying down the law and say, Israel, no, don't do this. You got lucky this time. Let's keep eye for an eye, and let's call it quits there.
Yeah, I don't know how. I don't see a pathway where the United States is not involved. Certainly, the statements coming out across Washington, D.C., they all got the memo, because we hear this word over and over again, ironclad. Yeah. Right. The commitment to Israel, ironclad. Today, I heard the spokesman at the State Department, Matt Miller, describe it as sacrosanct. Right. So this sacred commitment to Israel. Right. It's holy. It's religious. It's bound by a divine aspect. So I don't know how you get past that. You, as well as the fact that the overt commitment by the United States, regardless of what the White House is supposedly saying about how we said we're not going to support an Israeli attack. One, the United States is very clear that it will support Israel regardless of what happens. We also have to remember as well then that the use of the word offensive and defensive has no meaning whatsoever to the policymakers in Washington, D.C. They will describe any attack as defensive. So Israeli attacks into Iran will be described as defensive attacks. These are attacks that are meant to preclude another Iranian attack. This is an attack meant to make sure that Iran can't attack us again. They have used that wording over and over again, not just this administration, but pretty much every American administration in my lifetime, at least going back through Ronald Reagan, has used that description of any military action around the world by the U.S. as defensive. I mean, we've seen that this past year, these last 6 months, where U.S. airstrikes into Yemen, which have, I think, been well more than 100 at this point, between fixed-wing drone and missile strikes, have all been described as defensive. So I just don't see a pathway, to answer Chris, where the United States is not involved in this. And then, of course, there's that really, really danger. Ken Klippenstein at The Intercept had a good article yesterday or 2 days ago where he laid out how many nations are actually involved in this. And 16 countries are involved in this.
And the Jordanians, the Jordanians play a really unique role in this whole thing because they shot down some of the Iranian missiles that were headed east to west over their airspace, over the Jordanian airspace. And they said they did it to protect Jordanian airspace. But that's just on the face of it, absolutely false. They did it to basically protect Israel. Now, Jordan, as we know, has an enormous Palestinian population. And the Jordanian population that is not of Palestinian heritage is also incredibly sympathetic to the Palestinian cause. So the king of Jordan right there is putting himself in an even trickier spot by intervening directly in this. So it's, I saw one commentator asking today, if Israel launches rockets eastward across Jordanian airspace, will Jordan knock those down as they're headed over toward Iran? So, it's that's going to be the place that I'm watching because it's they're really they've been on thin ice for a really long time, towing the U.S. and Israeli line on regional conflicts and letting the United States use its territory, use Jordanian territory as well. So I'm very interested to see how that plays out, and I'm hoping for peace, but it's a tough situation there.
Right, and Jordan's a good example of all this, right? Because you had Iran threaten Jordan over this, so now you've had direct threats from Iran towards Jordan for Jordan's role in supporting Israel. You also had Iran make indirect threats or diplomatic threats towards the Gulf monarchies that support the American air bases, where the either missile defense systems or our fighter aircraft are based out of, right? And so the comments from the Iranian foreign minister were, we have not attacked, these Gulf monarchies. He didn't say it, but the word yet was there. I mean, it's this idea that it could develop into this regional war. It already is a regional war, as we've been describing, but something where it really becomes other nations are taking airstrikes and missile strikes. It's a very real possibility.
I think it's definitely shown that the Palestinians don't have friends around them. And not in the governments. I know the people in Egypt has been the same to me. Like it's not been any better. And they're all closing ranks basically with us in Israel.
Let me just mention this. First of all, hey, is this, I'm joking when I say this, is this a G-rated program, R-rated program?
It could it could be.
We pointed this out in the early stages of when this channel was formed. Within the first 4 months, I think, Jen organized with Katie Halper a free Assange telethon, which completely put us on the radar with with the shadow government.
Yeah, no, go ahead.
No,
let your free flag fly, Dan.
The reason I say this, first of all, Chris must be reading my notes because of the fact that was a good segue question. And I want to comment on something Chris said. I had it in my notes. Or maybe Matt just said we were talking about Jordan. And I'm talking about Egypt and Jordan. But first of all, when you're talking about, the largest population other than in Gaza of Palestinians is in Jordan. And when you said that, oh, by the way, when I asked what kind was this R-rated, whatever, I don't think there's nothing going on in the bedroom with the king right now because his wife happened to be of Jordanian. Right. Yeah. I don't know if you do that or not, but his wife is Jordanian. So there may not be a lot going on in the bedroom right now. The second thing I'll mention, when we talk about Egypt and Jordan, what you have to remember, everything that runs these wars is about money. And Egypt is getting $1 billion from the government to so-called keep peace with Israel. They don't really want to keep peace with Israel. Likewise with Jordan. We give them $1 billion or so a year. Why? To keep peace with. So that's why they're not doing it. But there's a lot of demonstrations going on in the streets of Jordan because of the fact they're really upset, at their king right now. And so now going back and also to the question that Christian mentioned also, Matt said a key word. If you notice, the president and all the spokesfolks are coming out and saying ironclad defense of Israel.
Right.
Okay. That's the key word, because let me just tell you this. When I said something about assumptions, opinions, and then facts, there was no question in my mind that Iran was going to respond. There was no question. They'd already proven it with us. If they didn't do it with us, I knew they would do it with Israel. The next thing, past history, there will be no doubt in my mind that Israel will respond back. As they say, that's their MO. Usually they would do what you call anticipatory self-defense, where they'll just go ahead and do it. Now, because the president came out and said, hey, don't do it, we're not with you on this, that held them back for a few days. Now, today I heard they've made the decision they're going to do it. Now, with that said, Christian, when you say, well, how do we get drawn in it? The political pressure from the Republicans is going to be so hard on the president that he's going to be forced. Unfortunately, and that's why I hate these words, I call them all political. It's all political calculations. The president is going to be forced. Marshall Blackburn of Tennessee has already started. The others, like the Tom Cottons and the Lindsey Graham. But the one that surprised me most, he's usually restrained, was Senator McConnell is talking about, he got to put his, foot where his mouth is now, whatever the case may be, and he has to go after Iran. Senator McConnell, that surprised me. So the pressure is going to be so tough, even if Israel responds, which now I really do think they're guarded because of the fact they've made the calculation that America and politics, they're going to be forced to support us, where it's going to be defensive in nature, but it's going to be offensive.
Well,
I think that they ain't seen nothing yet as far as like resistance if they think that. I mean, today was like an appetizer if they actually think they're going to do that. Like, people are not going to stand for it.
And we need to be out in the streets. I've been out in the streets. Somebody said I wasn't going to do. Listen, I got into this business a decade ago when I was working with the fights for the words you've heard me say before, in the Rumsfeld of the world. I got in this to so-called prevent this war with Iran. Because like I said, they've been planning it for decades. I got in this business to try to stop that. So that means if we have the war, I failed. So the next thing I'm going to do, I will be in the streets in Washington, D.C. I've already been out there as Matt, though. I've been on the Hill. And let me just tell you about that real quick. I was on the Hill a couple times a few weeks ago. AIPAC was every office we went to, they were 4 deep. They came in on a bus. And oh, by the way, what made me mad, I was telling a colleague today, when I went there, Matt, you remember in our days in the Pentagon, if a contractor comes in the Pentagon, first of all, you have contracts working in the Pentagon, but if you have like a program manager, something that comes in maybe 3 to 4 times a year, I think there was a, race you had to come in 3 or 4 times, we would give you a Pentagon pass contractor to come in, so we don't have to come down and pick you up and sign you in. I saw Hill passes on some of these AIPAC folks.
Oh,
unbelievable. I mean, me as a person that served in the Air Force and almost gave my life, I have to go through and be checked and everything. They walk in with their passes. Unbelievable. AIPAC.
The irony, even though we're not allowed, we have severed ties between what Jen is doing versus what we're doing here. But I will tell you that it is not lost on us that part of the district that's not here anymore is a place where a significant amount of these AIPAC lobbyists come from, including one of them who's running for city council not too far from here. It just goes to show you that the people who do this are always people who will never put their lives on the line, much less the congressional representatives who greenlight this and would never put their children or their family and friends in harm's way to actually fight this war.
We talked about that, right? We talked about that before. I believe, who were we talking with when we were talking about like forced conscription?
I mean, we've spoken about that with a lot.
Yeah, that idea, and I don't think it's a bad idea.
Let me make a comment. I'm going to be out of the country. I was invited. Two of our colleagues. Y'all heard the name Larry Wilkerson, of course.
Yes, we've had him on. Yeah.
Yeah, Larry's a good friend. We was on the phone talking about this stuff for over an hour yesterday, and he's been a good friend of mine since 2009. He and a Major General Dennis Lake are going over on the Hill. I'm like you, Jen. I don't believe in the draft, but they're thinking that if we start threatening the draft, they truly believe in it because they say we're going to fight this war. We need. In fact, General Lake.
That's how it'll end. That's how you end it.
He has a book called "No Skin in the Game." All these members that got, and so he's going over on the Hill May the 7th, but I'm not going to be in town. And they got 2 meetings with 2 senators to discuss that, in the draft. Like I said, I don't agree with it, but I like what they're doing. They're using it as a threat.
Yes.
To say, hey, we're going to bring back the draft. Everybody need to have skin in the games if we're going to continue this, all these wars.
Can we draft Lindsey Graham first?
Well, unfortunately, he was. I don't want to own him, but he was an airman like myself. He was a JAG officer, and I know his former boss. We used to sit on a board together. He said, "I don't know what happened to Lindsey." I mean,
come on, Air Force JAG is somebody who went to law school. I mean, come on, like those were definitely like the more lighty weight of the situations. I mean, come on.
Yeah,
you sound like a Marine.
No, but I'm just saying it's like that's not exactly. I mean, I don't know. I know a lot of people that went and did JAG, and I don't necessarily think of them as like hardcore.
The truth of the matter is, and Matt, you've spoken about this many times. It's one thing to be a chicken hawk. It's another thing entirely to be somebody like Brian Mast, who has actually served in combat, actually could have lost his life, lost 2 of his limbs. And he is as psychopathic hawkish as anybody in Congress.
I don't understand.
That is where that's the hard. I mean, granted, it has everything to do with just being completely corporate captured like our representative is, but to be that completely captured in that respect is really, it's got to be sickening to you guys in particular to see one of your own acting in the way
they don't claim him.
Well, I mean, hey, the military is a big institution. There is 2.7, 2.8 million of us went to the Iraq and Afghan wars. So you're going to have a big spread of personality types. The military has their psychopaths as well. Psychopaths like to climb the climb of power, right? They like to be in these types of positions. What percent of members of Congress would you estimate are, fit that definition of psychopath? A lot of them probably would. So you see Mast, you see Tom Cotton, you have, the John McCain, his ghost is still alive and well in Washington, D.C. So, I mean, the idea that utilizing your military service for your own political benefit, I mean, that goes back to the Romans. I mean,
well,
so
let me just say that. Oh, I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
Because see, you hit a nerve when you said Mast, and I'm gonna throw Featherman in there too. They committed two of the worst crimes. When you go to Mast, how do we allow an individual to wear this uniform of a foreign country into our capital? That's number one. He did that.
Yeah.
He wore an Israeli uniform to the Capitol. And then Fetterman, and one of those individuals that Fetterman did this to, she's now a colleague of ours. He waved an Israeli flag in the front of veterans.
Yeah.
How low down dirty is that?
Yeah. Well, what would happen if it were, imagine if it were a Russian flag or a Chinese flag or anything like that. And that's what's so infuriating to me about AIPAC, that none of their lobbyists are registered as foreign agents, and how they can contribute unlimited money because they're not considered to be a foreign entity. And there is no other country that has any sort of lobbying organization that isn't having to register as a foreign entity.
They're the only one. They're in the United States, Israel, lobby. Okay.
I mean, to me, this is something that we talked about recently regarding our Congresswoman Wasserman Schultz, who was just in Jerusalem with Netanyahu.
Oh yeah.
And this is like it's getting to the point now where obviously she's fully aware of what's in her rearview mirror politically.
But isn't somebody
so
running against her? Isn't there somebody that we know? Isn't there somebody running against her?
Yeah, somebody's running against her, and so because of that, she's now wrapped herself even tighter with AIPAC.
Well, she has nothing else to do but triple down. Like, what else could she do? You can't back up at that point.
That's true, but the danger that comes with doing that is incredible. And the fact that it's so much worse, as you guys know, on the Democratic side than the Republican side, because at least on the Republican side, you do have this anti-war libertarian pushback where they are dead serious about not getting involved in this stuff. And yet on the Democratic side, it's like they won't even say that somebody like Wasserman Schultz has no place in the Democratic Party anymore. Like they may think it, and I think a lot of them do. And we've had enough people that have come up to us privately and have said that she does not represent us. But in terms of publicly stating that one of her own doesn't belong with us anymore, they don't do that. And that's why it's in a way so much more dangerous that Biden is at the controls right now, because I think if Trump were there, for example, there would be this anti-war pushback, because from a political standpoint, it would make sense. When Biden is there, it's complete carte blanche for the GOP to be like, he's not going hard enough. And you get psychos like Marsha Blackburn that will come out and say, oh, he's weak on Iran and he's not doing this. And yet on the Democratic side, there is no pushback. It's like, oh, well, we don't want to upset the Republicans. I mean, they might.
Yeah, no, it's
they might
pitiful.
be. So do you guys, to put a bow on this particular part of the discussion, do you see any, do you agree in any capacity that in some way it actually is worse with somebody like Joe versus somebody like Trump in this case? Because I think the pushback on Trump would be a lot more solidified versus with Joe.
I don't know. I think this is where you get to the idea that there is an overlap between the Democrats and Republicans that is so firm and so fixed that you might always have that 50 or 60 members of opposition to war in the Congress. And when a Republican's in power, you'll have more from the Democrats. With Democrats in power, you have more from Republicans. I mean, you're seeing this in the sense of that some of these stalwarts, these American firsters, when it comes to China, or even when it comes to Israel. So you look at the remarks recently, some from Matt Gaetz, right? Matt Gaetz, who's been really good on some anti-war stuff, particularly offering war power resolutions towards both Syria and Yemen. When it comes to this, to Israel, or when it comes to China, he's as hawkish and as rabid as others are. So there. I think the idea of having principled, principled paths on this is something that, there's only a handful of members of Congress that adhere to that. So I think that the issue really becomes down to then is what other alternatives are presented. What other options are out there in terms of having people in positions of power who do offer some type of vision of peace and stability as opposed to war and profits. And Chris can talk about this, certainly, about that influence that the profits of corporations have on these guys. Because I think a lot of members of Congress, it really is just a transactional thing for them.
And that's the thing is like, I worry that sometimes we all get, and I'm guilty of this as the next person, we all get wrapped up in sort of the figurehead. Oh, if Trump was in, or oh, if Biden is in. And that allows us in a way to ignore the real structural matters. And, the question that you posed is it's important, but it's also like, all right, at some point we have to change the structure. Otherwise, we're going to keep getting the same result, no matter which party, red or blue, is at the top, is occupying the White House, is in control of the Senate or in control of the House. And in order to change that structure, we have to address the fundamental issues. That's corporate personhood. That's the series of, on top of that, the series of Supreme Court rulings that gives more and more authority to corporations, from Buckley versus Vallejo in the 70s all the way through Citizens United in 2010 and beyond that. we really got to get to the core issues, the core structural problems. Otherwise, we're just, we're just treading water, really.
Good point.
Yeah,
I think
my friend Mike Ferner, who's the director of Veterans for Peace, he describes us all as, that we have madmen arsonists in power, and we're running around chasing them with buckets of water. So rather than taking away the matches, we're running around trying to put out fires. We're constantly reacting. And what are we always reacting to? It's the same thing, because as Chris said, we have a structural problem.
You're right. As a friend of the show, Willie Bragg says, it's wrong to support Bibi Netanyahu when Ben Shapiro, Pastor John Hagee, the ultimate Christian Zionist, Alan Dershowitz, yuck, and Hillary Clinton, still teaching at Columbia.
Honestly, he is so disgusting to me. I can't even just for always. Dershowitz is so gross.
And thank you to Double K as always for the amazing support. So this is a good transition because, as you guys have probably been paying attention, the protests were fast and furious on tax day, but for different reasons. And so we're going to play a clip now from what I thought was the best protest today, and that was at Lockheed Martin.
Let's see.
Shut it down! Shut it down! Shut it down! Revolution! Revolution! One solution! Revolution! One solution! Revolution! One solution! Revolution! Boeing.
We're gonna get
I Lockheed Martin and Boeing because we've been demanding for months, years actually, for an end to all weapons sales to Israel, for an end to all U.S. aid to Israel, and they have not taken us seriously. They have not respected our demands or listened to our demands. So we're here to tell them, if you don't cut off your ties with Israel, we're going to block every single entrance to your weapons manufacturers, and we're going to protest in the streets until we shut it down because you refuse to. Lockheed, you can't hide.
Dude, they're serious.
You profit from genocide. Quit your job. Quit your job. Quit your job.
They're changing.
Well, we have an expert that can talk about that in criticism, because that's what he's our expert when we start talking about the Lockheeds, the Raytheons of the world, written a book.
Yeah.
And oh, by the way, he's probably internationally known now because he's challenged Google. Because I don't know if y'all are aware of this, but I'll let Chris talk about that. He had some maps where all these doggone military industrial complexes are located, and Google tried to take it down. We challenged, and he won. So I'll let him talk about that.
I can say with confidence that there are offices that at Boeing, Raytheon, Google, these other weapons and tech giants, where Chris's name is on a whiteboard someplace.
And I will say before you start, Christian, it shouldn't be lost on anybody that Lockheed Martin's headquarters is right across the street from Reagan National. So as soon as you fly into DC, you can't. The military industrial complex wants you to know that as soon as you get to our nation's capital, they are the ones who run the show.
I used to work in that building, believe it or not. Yeah, it's actually in Crystal City.
Yeah, and one thing for Chris go on, but one thing for people to visualize how big the military industrial complex is in terms of just the scale of it. If you're looking at that part of Virginia across the river from Washington, D.C., that entire strip from Roslyn all the way along the river to National Airport, that entire strip, which includes the Pentagon, the world's largest office building, is the Pentagon. All those buildings there are defense buildings. That's how, so you're talking just in that one strip, hundreds of thousands of people who work for the military industrial complex. Can you imagine if we put that human capital into anything else, what we could achieve, what could come from that? But I'll let Chris speak now.
No, that's such a great point. I mean, I like to think of it as the United States' #1 technological project since 1945 has been technology for war and espionage. And like Matt was saying, imagine if our #1 priority had been anything else, where we would be, what we would have. I mean, the benefits are absolutely, the human mind cannot begin to wrap I can't wrap my head around it. And so if that doesn't infuriate you, then it really, really should, because we can have nice things. We can live in a healthy society. Yeah. And it's just a matter of, at this point, a lack of political will. And that political will can only be generated by a working class that is 100% united, or as united as possible, united across racial lines. And with those numbers, we can do anything. So I want to be optimistic. I want to be positive here. It can be done, but it really, really takes us to unite. So with regard to the map that Dennis and Matt were talking about, long story short, in 2023, my side project for that year was mapping all of the locations in the United States, all of the facilities where Lockheed Martin, Raytheon, Northrop Grumman, General Dynamics, Boeing, and L3 Harris, the big six, produce stuff. And so I looked at military contracting announcements, I looked at corporate press releases, and I looked at corporate job postings. And I took the information, the addresses, as well as the what they're producing from those sources, and I put them into a map. And this took me pretty much all of 2023. And so at the end of November, I made the map, and it made the rounds. But once the protests really took off, and particularly around the genocide in Gaza, and people were using the map to coordinate, and independent media outlets were reproducing the map, then Google said, all right, no more. And to make matters even more absurd, they claimed that I was in violation of a dangerous and illegal activities policy of Google Drive, which is just absolutely absurd. So
Mapping is very dangerous.
You can't be mapping. You can't take publicly available information and put it into a map. So I hit the appeal button. I didn't hear anything back from them, but the good folks at Eisenhower Media Network put out a press release, and we put a little pressure there. And an independent journalist named Taylor Barnes made some inquiries and wrote up a piece. And Google reversed their decision, and so the map is now once again publicly available. It's over at my Substack, thebusinessofwar.substack.com. And yeah, I'm going to continue to keep updating it, because like any industry, the war industry is constantly buying and selling. Corporations within are buying and selling different business segments, and they're shuttering facilities and opening new facilities. So I want it to be a public service. So I'm going to keep updating it, because we can convert the war industry into peaceful industries. It absolutely can be done.
Yeah, I believe in the movement. I'm not going to say the R word, because we're not allowed to say the R word, but I do. I think that it's changing. And I want to go back to Israel for a second, because people often ask me when I'm talking, well, how do you see this resolving itself? And in my mind, the only way this is going to resolve itself is with people taking Israel back from Israel. Israel's not going to give it back. And the only way that'll ever be one democratic state is if they're forced to do so. And so I'm curious, like, how you people with experience in this see that happening, because they're never going to voluntarily just stop existing, but they're going to have to.
Well, Matt, do you want to? Sometimes I feel like I'm jumping in too much, and so I would like to sit back and listen. So, Matt, if you want to take it, I'll just
do you have something optimistic to say, Dennis? Because I sure as hell don't.
Well, I do. Jen, I'm going to look at you, Jen.
Okay.
And the reason I say that, I'm going to look at you. A good friend of mine is Ben Cohen. I spent a lot of time talking with him. And I'm going to look at you. And then I'm going to look at the young people. And I'm going to look at social media. Oh, by the way, when you talk about we're trying to get rid of TikTok. Look, I'm an old man and I'm a TikTok nut, because of the fact that's where you get good information. Now, I say that to say this. Jen, the reason I look at you is because of the fact, being Jewish and seeing your eyes open, as you said, I remember I told you last time, I love you so much, because you say, hey, I used to be a Zionist. Yeah. And I love you for that. I love you for saying, hey, but my eyes were open. Ben is in his 70s. We sat down over dinner. Dennis, it took me a while, but my eyes are open. I tell folks, I was with a group, and I said, it's all about humanity. I don't care if you're black, white. Matt and Kristen and I, we love each other, and we come from all different backgrounds. But it's about humanity, and it's going to take all of us coming together. But it's going to take you, Jen, coming from that world to continue to be outspoken. So that's why I was so proud of you. And then when they hear people who've done it and got the T-shirt and coming out and say, "Hey, this is wrong," you got our back. We got your back. I think I told you that the last time. We got your back. And so that's what it's going to take, because you've been there, done that, and got the T-shirt, and you're able to talk about it. You have the boldness and the strength to talk about it. Now, my role, the Matt's role of the world, the Christian role of the world, is to have your back and continue to share that word. That's how it's going to come to, an eventual conclusion, because I hate to say this. We got to be able to separate. It's not the typical Israeli citizen. It's not the typical Jewish person. Because when I went out there, Free Palestine demonstrations I went to, there were as many Jewish people as there were Black Americans and Catholics and all that. So it's going to take all of us coming together to fight the Zionists and the elite 12 or so people, to tackle them. And when they see the people, like members of Congress, you see many of them now changing their tune because of the fact they see the people in the street. Now, I got a young lady that I work with, and she don't understand. Now she's jumped on this thing now. And she said, "How, like you, Jen," you said, "How do we do this? You ready for this? As bad as things are, this is the most optimistic I've ever been when it coming. We'll finally have a conclusion." At one time, it was only one other person in the world I could talk up to this about this and understood, and that was Larry Wilkerson.
Yeah.
And so.
But what do you see happening there? Like, that's my, like, how does that end? Israel's never going to say, "Oh, yes, we're going to let everybody come home, have the right of return, have a democracy." That's never going to happen. So is this something where, like, an international body of people have to go in and basically take it back?
Unfortunately, remember I said you could give assumptions, opinions. Okay, I'm giving you something, an opinion. None of us really know, but I can give you an opinion. Unfortunately and sadly, it's going to take a war and many more people to get killed. Unfortunately, as much as we talk about how gross and how bad October 7th was, it took that for millions of people around the world, but mainly in the United States, to understand the plight of the Palestinians since 1948. It took October the 7th. Now, what's going to happen? Unfortunately, it's going to take that war, because the Zionists are going to make sure it happened. And there's going to be a lot of people probably killed in Israel for that to happen. And then finally, the United Nations and the United States itself, who runs the United Nations, is going to have to change their tune, because of the fact the American people and others around the world are not going to take it anymore. Like, here's why I'm the most optimistic. I've never seen so many demonstrations that are going on. I've never participated in a demonstration in my life until this. Even Black Lives and all that, I'd never participated in a demonstration until this. And I participated in 2 in Washington, D.C.
Welcome to the radical side, Dennis. Welcome.
Yeah, I had never. And so that's what it's going to take. It's going to be some war, and then it's going to be the people in the street. It's going to happen. I guarantee it's going to happen. And so that's how it's going to end. But now, remember I said, that's an assumption and an opinion, but it's going to take war. And like I said, how do I get my assumption, my opinions? Look at October the 7th. Unfortunately, it took October the 7th, and then that opened the eyes of everybody of the plight, and people started studying. How did this happen? I spent so much in the last 6 months. Spent so much time talking to people and explaining. I get my phone calls. "Hey, Dennis, can you explain this to me?" So, assumption, an opinion, but it's going to take the war finally come, and then people are going to say, "Hey, we can't have this."
What do you guys think?
Do you want optimistic or pessimistic?
I want realistic.
Realistic.
That's me.
I think unless we have the structural change that Chris was talking about, the American Congress, the American political system remains captured by the Israeli lobby. The Israelis know that. They've got the United States behind them. Most importantly, the world's reserve currency behind it. They can be Fortress Israel. They see this as their opportunity the Israelis see this as their opportunity to finish or finalize the greater Israel project. They have public opinion behind them, 70%. 2 weeks ago, there was a poll, 68% of Israelis were supporting the blockade of food into Gaza, right? So 68% of Israelis were supportive of the deliberate starvation of the Palestinian people in Gaza. I mean, so they have that support. They may not like Netanyahu. 71% of Israelis want Netanyahu to resign. That doesn't mean there's going to be any type of change, though. And so as long as the American political system is captured by Israel, just as it's captured by big pharma, right? Just as it's captured by big ag, right? Just as it's captured by the banks, until we have that structural revision, these types of things will continue to occur. And so that's where I see this going, and how that then develops in terms of a regional war, how that develops into, again, this idea of fortress Israel that is proceeding on a pathway to complete this, idea of greater Israel. I think that's because even if you had an American president, even if we were to elect, a Jill Stein, and the American Congress would impeach the president if the president was to do anything that it viewed as harmful to Israel. So you have these structural problems, again, as Chris was talking about, that unless we address, we will constantly be in this position.
Hey, Chris,
and I will say, though, optimistically, though, trying to do this real quick, if the fact is that 55% of Americans, according to Gallup, are against Israel's military operations in Gaza. That's the way Gallup phrased genocide. But if 55% of Americans are against Israel right now, in spite of the fact that American corporate media and almost all of our politicians are just basically regurgitating Israeli lobby talking points, if 55% of Americans are against this, that shows you the strength. That shows you how far independent media has come. That shows you the reach of independent media. So if we're going to have anything accomplished, if we're going to continue on any type of path, if we're going to have any type of resistance against what we are up against, it will be inspired, it will be informed, it will be organized through independent media, just like what you guys do.
I hope so.
I think that is we're going to do one more topic before we go, because that is a perfect point that you made, Matt. It is the structural problem in this country. I was going to pull up an article, but Colin, our esteemed, wonderful producer, was able to put a clip together earlier today. Who better than Glenn Greenwald to talk about the recent vote to reauthorize the FISA Act, which basically means that we do not have any civil liberties when you get right down to it. So this is like the whole concept of the Patriot Act and how people thought that the Patriot Act was done in response to 9/11. No, the Patriot Act was passed because they used 9/11 as the political football they needed in order to get it across the finish line.
I read that thing.
Yeah, pretty sick, I'm sure.
I read it. I am that dork.
Oh, you are a lawyer. So.
Whatever.
Here we go.
And yet the vote came up today, and they tried to pass an amendment to this bill that would have imposed a warrant requirement. And the vote on the amendment was 212 to 212. Which is a tie, which means the amendment was defeated. And the only reason it was a tie is because Mike Johnson, as Republican House Speaker, did something he rarely does, which is actually cast his own vote on the bill. Had he not done that, it would have passed 212 to 211. But because he cast a vote, a no vote, it ended up being defeated. There was also intense lobbying from the Biden White House, from the U.S. security state, from Republican security hawks in the Congress who don't care at all about the civil liberties or the privacy rights of American citizens. Now, the history that led up to this law and how we ended up as a country that permits warrantless eavesdropping on American citizens, even though we have a constitution that in the Fourth Amendment prohibits any search and seizure or surveillance without a warrant, is absolutely vital. But before we get to that, we wanted to show you the shameful and quite shocking events that happened today in the House. So I think the best summary of what happened came from Congressman Thomas Massie, the Republican of Kentucky, who was on our show just a couple months ago, one of the leaders in the House for many years in defending the privacy rights of American citizens. And this is what he wrote, quote, "This is how the Constitution dies. By a tie vote, the amendment to require a warrant to spy on Americans goes down in flames. This is a sad day for America. The speaker doesn't always vote in the House, but he was the tiebreaker vote today. He voted against warrants.
I think that we don't even need to listen to anything further because the point has been stated. You know, a lot of times when we talk about this, we recently had a congressman down here named Ted Deutsch, who is now basically is Wasserman Schultz adjacent in terms of the being captured by the Israel lobby. Now, he's somebody who supported Medicare for all. But we all know that much like bills like this, they'll vote yes on it because it doesn't have a chance of passing.
Right. It's just posturing.
So when something gets close, like this particular bill to basically protect our civil liberties, as the likes of the Thomas Masseys of the world, who are the few good members of the conservative right, are actually looking out for our constitutional rights. Mike Johnson had to do what the military industrial complex wanted him to do, which is, no, we are reauthorizing our ability to spy on all Americans. And he went with it, even though this is supposedly some guy who is dead set against that stuff. But when push comes to shove, you find out exactly who's pulling the strings, who's calling the shots. And so I don't know if they're going to try to remove Mike Johnson now as they did Kevin McCarthy. We'll see what happens. But this is what you talk about, Matt, when it comes to the infrastructural issue that we deal with on a regular basis. And no better example than what just happened today.
Right. And what it means in terms of, a continual erosion of American life, basically, right? So this assault on the Fourth Amendment, so people could see the Julian Assange poster over my shoulder. I do a lot of work with the Free Assange campaign. And what we find is what I've seen continually is that when we talk about Julian Assange, which, people associate with as a very severe First Amendment issue, right? But oftentimes that intertwines and dovetails with these Fourth Amendment issues as well. So this concept of government censorship is almost unbreakable from this idea of government surveillance. The assault and erosion of the First Amendment goes hand in glove with attacks upon the Fourth Amendment.
Yeah. For sure. Well, we lost 4, 5, and 6 in the Patriot Act. And I remember reading it at the time and I'm like, well, that doesn't look good. And then everybody was signing it in Congress and none of them even read it.
Right.
None of them even read it.
Well, remember when they passed Obamacare, as Nancy Pelosi so eloquently said, we have to pass it and then to know what's in it. And I'm just thinking, is it really like this? Yes, it is. And that's why people lose hope. And that's why. No, please.
Go ahead.
Oh, no, I was just saying that. And the issue that it comes is people think this doesn't affect me or it won't bother me or, and you see the creep that comes out of it, that this is only about people who are talking to people overseas. But, the way that it works, the way that both the FBI and local law enforcement can utilize this information for their own purposes whenever they want is very well established. I mean, thousands upon thousands of incidents of the FBI and local law enforcement utilizing this data that they should not have access to. This goes into other things too, where you have, say just in the case that occurred recently where, what was his name? Joshua Schulte, who was the person who leaked the Vault 7 CIA files. During his trial, it was brought up that his use of a VPN, as well as other privacy tools on his computer, were indicative of criminal behavior. Not because he was, doing criminal things, but because it had the possibility of doing criminal things, right? That anyone using privacy software has the ability to mask what they're doing. And because they can mask what they're doing, well, that means they could be doing illegal things or untoward things or things that we don't approve of. So you can see how this, this slippery slope exists. And it's very, very dangerous.
That's prior restraint, which is not constitutional, right? So, I mean, that's why, again, I read this crap because I'm that person. But I remember looking at that and I'm thinking, Well, okay, so we don't have 4, 5, and 6 anymore, but people are very obsessed with 2. I wonder if the people that are obsessed with 2 know that we don't have 4, 5, and 6. And so I don't know. Like, it's so interesting to me how everyone picks and chooses. And most people have no idea that their rights have gone. And I actually have a cousin at one point that said something to me along the lines of, well, I don't care if they listen to me. I'm not saying anything that I'm worried about them saying. And I'm like, yeah, that's really, you're really not seeing it. Like, it's just,
Right.
it's not the point at all.
Spoken like a true.
And I have the most
comfortable-
boring background ever. Seriously, the
Yeah.
first time I ran, I had someone do a deep dive on me just to see, like, nothing, literally nothing. It's just sad.
I want the other guys to chime in too, but the simple answer to that is, do you have a passcode on your phone? Right? If you've got nothing to hide, if anyone can go into your business, then why do you have a passcode on your phone?
I don't.
Right? Oh, you do.
I don't.
Good.
Oh, please! If somebody wanted to hack me, I have pathetic. We don't even lock our door. My husband has it set so that it'll lock automatically after 20 minutes, just because he knows that I won't even think to lock the door. So yeah, I don't have a passcode. Anybody could look at my phone. You just have to swipe, and everything's there.
Yeah, I don't have one anymore, but I want to say one thing that I want to hear Chris takes on it, because Chris and I have had some intimate conversations about this. He may have some views on this, but I will tell you, I've come to accept that because the business I'm in now, I'm eavesdropped, wiretapped, and everything.
Yeah.
I've come to accept that. Okay, and I say that to say this. That's why I'm not worried about no TikTok. I worry about what they have on me versus the Chinese.
Right.
What the Chinese want to do with me. I worry about them. Like I said, but I accept the fact that it's happening to me. Okay. And so I stand by, what I say or do, because what I think I'm doing is right. I want to make a comment. You probably heard about Airman Bushnell, the guy that,
Yes.
Yeah. Well, we had a couple of active duty airmen that has been coming out. And I got to tell you, me as a former senior enlisted leader, I've been trying to tell them, as active duty service member, don't come out openly protesting, because of the fact, don't ruin your career. We got this. Okay.
Yeah.
But I say that to say this, we had an individual that just recently went on a hunger, strike, and I spent a lot of time with him, just so you'll know. He's back in his country now. He's back in Spain, his assignment now. But I spent a lot of time with him and talking, with him about it. Now, the reason I bring him up, and I say I accept that I'm being, one of the things that they called him back to, and they put in his letter, is that we're going to take your clearance because we're questioning your allegiance to the United States of America. And I said I will come over there to be a character witness for him, because his allegiance to America is a lot stronger than every member of our Congress who has not spoken out. Because what he's trying to do is to save our standing in the world. And oh, by the way, he knows, as a military man, we in the military know this, we are aiding and abetting the law of armed conflict and the Geneva Conventions, because of the fact you are not to bomb a hospital, as you have been hearing in the news. We're not supposed to do that. We're not even supposed to bomb the residences and property of civilians. And this young man was fighting because of the fact, hey, you expect me to follow the directions of my commander-in-chief when he's violating, expecting me to support the aiding and abetting of the law of armed conflict. And so I say that. So if you want to eavesdrop on me, if you want to tap me or whatever the case may be, I stand by what I say or do, but they're doing it illegally. And that, like young lady, you say, hey, I don't care if they tap me. It's not the idea that I don't care if they listen in on me. It's illegal.
We're all being listened in on. I would
Yeah.
say, is present company or people that are being listened in on.
Exactly. So I tell all my friends that, hey, you're probably being listened in on, friends. That's the illegal part of it,
Christian, bring us home.
I'd just say in conclusion that, we're talking about Section 702. We're talking about NSA, FBI, and, CIA and other organizations. Those organizations and the contractors, the war corporations that provide all the technology for those organizations, are filled with people that could be doing anything else. And so I'm bringing this all together, some of the things we've talked about. At these contractors, at these war corporations, there are engineers, there are physicists, there are mathematicians, there are computer programmers. When we, the people, eventually rise up and convert the war industry into peaceful fields, these brilliant minds will be free. They will be free to actually help. Education, infrastructure. They can work on public transportation. They can work on space exploration, peaceful civilian space exploration. They can work on rewilding, on anything that our minds come up with, things that benefit. And so so I'll leave us with that on an optimistic note that that when we shift our priorities, and shifting our priorities means shifting the budgets. And once you shift the budgets, that's where everything really, really changes. We can unite as the poor and the working class of this country and challenge the 1%. And one of our goals, one of our main unifying goals should be converting the war industry into peaceful civilian fields, because that's something we can all rally around, along with things like bringing the troops home and taking care of them. These are goals that the poor and the working class of this country can really unite around, and as well as shifting the budget. So I'll leave us all with that.
Cannot and will never be able to thank you guys enough in more ways than one, not only for your service, but obviously for coming on our show. It's always a pleasure. And obviously, especially right now, these conversations are immensely important because quite frankly, I think a lot of people are scared, and they should be, because this is a situation where it was always going to get worse before it gets better. But we're in a very precarious place right now.
And I'm not scared. It's weird. I'm not scared.
Well, maybe you're not.
I'm not.
Well,
I feel like bring it. Like what else is it? What else is going to happen? Like, what are you supposed to do? I mean, I don't know. I feel like I agree with Dennis. Like, I feel like inspired by what we're seeing. And I think that it's a turning point in a good way. And I'm also okay not knowing what's going to happen.
Fair enough.
I'm okay with the unknown.
Life's a journey. Enjoy the ride. Guys, it's obviously, as I said, been a pleasure. Matthew Hoh, Dennis Fritz, Christian Sorensen. Guys, please check out the Eisenhower Media Network. Yes. This is for veterans, by veterans, for anti-war movements, which we desperately need. And as always, it's a pleasure to speak with you guys.
Thank you, guys.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
To say the least, that they are great.
Love
and
those
they're, they really are the people who serve our nation in the best way possible. And so,
but I want to, like, to me, the idea when I think of, when taking money out of what we call the military budget, it's not even a budget. It's just, it's a nonstop corporate operation. But when we talk about that, like, and we know here as people that subscribe to MMT that that's not how it works in terms of taking money from one and giving to the other. But the idea of that, those resources not being utilized in that manner, and going and us focusing our collective resources on things like healthcare, education, and other social safety nets for people to like thrive. We shouldn't just be wanting to survive.
No,
like we can do better than that. So that's why, and the military spending really only helps very, very, very small group of people to thrive. Whereas spending on other types of investments like education and healthcare causes everybody to thrive.
No, we're hoping for that. That's for sure.
Yeah.
Now, if you guys like the lineup we had tonight,
screw Raytheon.
Yeah. The lineup on Thursday is even better. We're going at 1, and we're going with the body and his son. So make sure you're here.
We're going to have a little peremptory 420 discussion on 418.
And who better could we talk to than Jesse Ventura and Tyrell Ventura?
And they're going to be talking about their new venture, which is cannabis related.
And you are the cannabis candidate.
I am a cannabis candidate.
So we definitely want to speak with those who
understand. Instead of CanCon.
CanCon, yes.
Yeah, well, instead of CanCon, can.
Well, speaking of 420, you got the message that I sent you, right?
Yes, we can have a little 420 expedition.
Little hike. Well, I can
little 420 expedition.
Yes.
Yes, Jesse is coming on Thursday. We'll be doing an afternoon show. And we will be talking about their new cannabis venture. I believe they have a farm. It's a farm. They're probably having they're growing.
For those of you who want to lend a hand, and that's all I'm going to say, just send a message to us on social media. You can't do it here, but send it on social media.
Yeah.
And we appreciate anybody who wants to help out. And so if you are so inclined, especially for our friends, you don't like my music, make sure you go over to patreon.com/generational change for as little as $5 a month. I will run them right now.
Yes, guys. And really, this is extremely helpful to support our small but mighty channel.
It is small but mighty.
We are small but mighty. And I think it's worthwhile. We get really good discussions. We have very good guests. And we have a nice library of good resources, which is what I always wanted to do, was create a library of resources.
Well, we all know how sympathy works on Canadians, so we will continue to do that. And by the way, we didn't address it tonight, but we'll just address it briefly before we go, even though I would have liked to have Clay. It's not about the Canucks. It's the fact that, and again, because it's our podcast, not about the campaign, it's that Bill Maher decided to do a closing new rules on Friday, talking about how the U.S. healthcare system is actually better than Canada's. Look, there's a lot of things that Canada doesn't do right, and there's no question that they're overtaxed. But if you're going to tell me that the basic needs of health, which are covered in Canada, doesn't automatically make them a better system than the one that we have, that's just crazy.
Well, I think what people are confused about is that they believe, and this is actually rightfully, that we have the capability in this country that is the best healthcare in the world, and some of the
rich.
Well, that's what I'm saying. That's my point. We have that here. We do have our universities, our research, all of those things that create a top quality healthcare resources. We have that. For sure, better than most countries. The problem is that it's only available to some people. And by some, I mean very few. And exactly. So even though we have the availability of some really great healthcare here, it doesn't count if it only is good for a few people, right? So yes, overall, we have probably better. Yes, of course they are more progressive. We might have better quality in certain fields of healthcare, certain aspects of healthcare. We very well we might be the best at some things, but yet we have higher infant and maternal mortality rates. We have lower life expectancy. So our results of our system are not helping us. So yes, we do probably have some of the best available healthcare in the world in this country. We probably do. But so if nobody can afford it, then what difference does that make?
As Mr. MMT himself, Danny Wyndham, has to say, it's not about the money of her health. Care taxes will not pay for health care.
Oh, Danny, I'm so sorry I didn't get back to you on the phone burner thing. I cannot figure out that system for the life of me.
No,
please send me messages on Patreon. You're a Patreon or patron. Then I know I'm communicating. I cannot figure out how to check the messages on that phone
Danny,
burner.
just so you know, I actually listened to Peter Schiff on Patrick Bet-David the other day. It is Peter Schiff wants to go back to the gold standard. Like he thinks that's the
okay. That ship sailed. That's just silly.
Yes, that ship has sailed.
No, point is we have those things. We just don't have them available to regular people. So that's that. So when people say we have the best healthcare system, we do have a really good healthcare system.
If you have the money.
Well, right. It's just not available to our people. Right. But yet it is that, right. Like if you are very wealthy, oh yeah, we've got top of the line stuff here. We do. We have top of the line stuff here.
Metal, what's wrong with that? What's wrong with assisted suicide? I'd like to know what's wrong with that.
Yeah, I'm a fan.
If people are living in perpetual pain that there is no end, if they choose to take the happy pills, if that's how they want to go, that's legal in Oregon.
Love how people think that that's like some simple thing. It's the same people that think women go in their 9th month and just choose to have an abortion and that's just a thing. That's not, you look at very few outliers, but what is wrong with supporting unhoused? The only reason we have so many unhoused people is because we don't have living wage. And we don't have living wage because the corporations get all of the welfare. Like so the unhoused people, like if somebody's working full time and they can't afford to live, that's not their failing.
And Metal, even if that's true, let's just say that that's true. This is the thing in politics.
I am not looking that up.
This is the thing in politics called straw man. You see, if there were 20,000 perfectly healthy people that were being given the happy pills to off themselves, then you might have a story. But you're picking an outlier of a circumstance. When you do that, that's how narratives are formed.
And it doesn't serve. It doesn't serve. You have to go by right. You have to go by what's in.
Yeah.
This is like an Occam's razor scenario, right? You go with the most likely.
Just as JR says, unemployment is manufactured just as the employment numbers.
Oh yeah, well that's silly. Well, even if it weren't right, it doesn't matter. If somebody's working 3 jobs but can't afford to
count a person. They count a person with 3 jobs as 3 jobs for the census. That's how they count it. They don't count it as one person.
Bullshit. That doesn't count.
That's a problem.
That doesn't count.
And so when everyone's looking around saying the economy's doing great, what are you measuring? You measuring the stock market? It's amazing how people actually measure the stock market as a health standard.
It's hilarious to me. Do you know how many people that represents? Like, what's the percentage of people that are represented by health of a stock market? Like, whose personal finances are better when the stock market is good? Let me say this. None of my friends, although now I have some new friends that might not be able to say that anymore, but none of my friends prior to a few months ago lives are affected. Like, I don't know people affected by that in the regular basis. It's very few people.
Oh, we would love to talk with Jim Belushi. See, now that would be a fun conversation.
Oh no, I would love to. And we reached out at one point.
Jim Belushi follows very few people on social media, but he follows Jen.
And we've reached out I'd love to have him come on and talk about he makes cannabis infused ice cream. Ooh. And it's under a Blues Brothers brand of like ice cream, and the flavors look really good.
Sure, they're great.
And it's organic ice cream, which is also good. But so I'd love to have him on the show.
So thank you all. It has been a very
I don't listen to Bill Maher unless he brings it and makes me watch it here. I cannot listen to that.
Bill Maher has to say about abortion. Could care less. And Dr. West's VP pick. Hey, look, the truth of the matter is, if the left ever had their ish together, it would be Dr. West running with Jill Stein. That's.
There's so many issues, though. Yeah. There's just so many
as a result,
issues.
there is no momentum. There's no traction. You know, the difference, of course, is that people on the political right will rally in spite of everything to a candidate who is espousing, and then they'll coalesce. They don't do that on the left.
You know that Claudia De La Cruz is, what's her running mate's name? Like Karina? Is it Karina?
Like that, I don't know.
She's pregnant, which I think is kind of sweet.
But the fact that you have 3 candidates who may be on several ballots throughout the country, it looks like RFK is probably going to get on most ballots. But RFK is not the left. And so when you have candidates like Claudia De La Cruz, Dr. Cornel West, and Dr. Jill Stein all running on separate ballots, you already have a hard enough time creating any type of momentum. Do you think if those 3 candidates united under one ticket that they couldn't be at least within striking distance of getting 5% of the vote? I think.
Well, I think RFK will do it regardless.
Yes, I think he will.
And that I am happy about. But, you know, and I've said it before, I mean, I support Dr. West. And when I get my ballot, I will make my decision accordingly. But I mean, I imagine that my likely option here will be green.
Yep, we'll see what happens.
I mean, I know that will be on my ballot. Yeah. I don't know what else will, but I know that will be on my ballot. So that will be my default.
Smash that like button, share, subscribe, do all those things I ask you to do. Travers, you don't like my music, Carniverde, Jimmy Zimzam, Metal, JR, Mario, Ghislaine, Donald James, Chris Garrett, of course, Travers, Danny Wyndham, Teresa. Who else? We've got quite a lively chat tonight.
It's good stuff. Good stuff.
So smart, so stupid, but you're not stupid. I'm not taking that. Joe Anthony, Let's see, Paula F.
And we
Let's
saw,
see,
I saw
really good
Chip was on there
comments.
too. Chip was here.
Yes, Chip was here, firmware, but Chip, as he's
Do you know what? But you know why though? Why it's Chip?
firmware.
But do you know why Chip and firmware go together?
No, I don't.
Like,
oh, you mean like a microchip?
Yeah.
Yes. Well, yeah, it took me a second to figure that out. I'm not that stupid. I'm so smart and not so stupid. That's what I fall under. That's my purview. Randall Giovanetti. I think we're getting most of you guys.
Yeah.
You know, I guess it. Double K, of course. And a screen went dead.
We're back to
Trying to tell
now
us to
that
get
we're
off.
now that we're down to like our OGs because we're down to our original platform, which is fine. And I actually, it's all
We
good.
still had 50 people show up.
Yeah,
I mean,
no,
that's not
it's
bad.
good. No,
And
I'm
we've been
totally,
out for a week, so
no,
people are a little
it's
surprised.
good.
And we went on at 8, not 9.
A lot of variables. A lot of
Yes.
variables.
So you guys are consistent. Steve Grossman, the anti-corporatist. Not bad. Not bad. Not bad.
Yeah.
I think that. Oh, and Mastermind Hour. You are new. Nice to see you. We did get it out there a little bit on social media, but you guys know that. And of course, last but not least, Willie Bragg. So we appreciate you all. As I said, smash that like button, share, subscribe, do all those things we ask you to do. 1 o'clock Thursday, Jesse and Tyrell Ventura. We'll see you then.
Bye, y'all.